We are in for a great afternoon. Today we end our program at 4 o'clock, which is 1 hour less than yesterday, and based on the feedback, that's a good thing because going until 5 o'clock in August is challenging for all of us. We have a great afternoon. Here's a preview of what's to come. We have Dr. Ball and Dr. Golson, who are going to chat with us a little bit about conceptions of educator learning and give us some ways to think about that for approximately an hour. It'll probably be a little longer than that, and that's great. We have some team time in between. Amy Noel Parks coming back up and talking about educator learning as well. So we're really centered on adult learning and implications for that. In our team time chunk between those two sessions, we have Heather Kowalski, who's going to give us our third story of what the work has looked like over the past year or two for her in her context, which will be really helpful. And then we'll end our day with a chance to spend some time with our team and put a bow on all of our things before some of us go play some golf, and others of us, yep, Diane's in, and others of us have a great dinner and enjoy beautiful weather in Traverse City. So that is our plan. Without further ado, again, they need no introduction. Let's welcome Dr. Ball and Dr. Golson.
Good afternoon. Is that even a mic? Is that mic on? Yeah, okay. We got the after lunch slot again, so we're really excited about that. And we thank you so much for those of you who gave us feedback on yesterday's session, and we hope that you'll see that we thought about it and read it and used it to think about what kinds of things we need a little more time on and how we can connect ideas to the work that you do. So hopefully you'll see the evidence that we were listening. So this afternoon, we're turning to thinking about how we support educators. Yesterday, we were thinking more about storylines and teaching, but today we want to think, how do we support educators to make the kind of changes that we're talking about? So the problem for today, picking up from yesterday, is how can we support educators to bear witness to and change storylines? That's a tall order and takes a lot of thought about what we're doing educationally as people, as leaders. So here's the agenda, just really briefly. You can see the layout, just see the logic of the session. And we'll be doing some activity together to practice some parts of this. So yesterday's work and a connection to today, one of the things that we saw when we were reading the feedback were some different sorts of comments, like, what was the point of the talk? I got kind of lost. Another was like, there's a lot to think about here. And yet another was, there were ideas here that were really eye-opening for me. I hadn't heard about discretionary spaces. The storyline idea is really something I want to hold on to. It gives me a different way to think. So this is some sampling of some of what we heard. So we thought it might be helpful to really quickly show the logic of yesterday and show how that's connected to the logic of the design of this session. Do you want to take that, Maisie?
Sure. So I'm just going to read through this, and then as I'm going through, I wanted to respond to one of the questions in the parking lot that is really a lovely question. So one is that multiple storylines about children, math, and learning are reconciled in minute-to-minute practice. That's one of the big ideas. This reconciliation of storylines happens in discretionary spaces, which is a concept that Dr. Ball has created to help us see things inside of that minute-to-minute practice. Seeing storylines requires us to bear witness, meaning we have to slow down and look and be really deliberate and oftentimes confront things that are problematic. Storylines about learning powerfully shape the other storylines, such as who children are and what mathematics is. And I don't think anyone did a better job than Amy this morning talking about, talking about the connection between how we think about learning and how that affects how we think about children and math, okay? Won't belabor that. But if we move to the next slide, The two different metaphors of learning permeate storylines, and we call these the acquisition and participation metaphor. Again, Amy nailed this morning, but we just want, again, for completeness, the acquisition metaphor dominates children's mathematics learning in the early years. Okay, this is the primary way in which we understand, and it locks us into conceptions of children and math that maintain the status quo. And I think all of us in this room are a little bit tired of the status quo. We want to shift it. So the participation metaphor opens up space to do that. And the essential practices are the kinds of practices that engage a participation metaphor. They help us change storylines about who children are and what mathematics is. But that doesn't mean that they don't have challenges, okay? So there's still new challenges inside of the participation metaphor. The participation metaphor takes us closer to changing what children do as math learners, okay? Now, one of the questions that was in the parking lot that I'll just turn to really quickly is, are storylines we tell ourselves common beliefs? Are these just beliefs, or are they reality, okay? And so they're not individually held beliefs, they're social and societal beliefs, and they're so strong that they feel like they're real. But the thing about storylines is that we can change them. That means that we can change the ways that we're constraining our day-to-day. Our reality is, in some ways, how we construct it and how we make it and how we shift those storylines. So, taking that to today's work, same logic. One, teachers' professional education parallels everything that we talked about yesterday. Multiple storylines about teachers, math, and learning play out and are reconciled. We're doing that reconciliation work. This reconciliation of storylines happens in the discretionary spaces that we're gonna build, right? Seeing these storylines requires us, as teacher educators, to bear witness, and storylines about learning are extremely powerful in shaping other storylines about who teachers are and what they do as learners. The same metaphors for learning that relate to children are the ones that shape teacher education, so acquisition and participation. The key thing here is that acquisition metaphor dominates much of formal teacher education. It locks us into conceptions of teachers and mathematics that maintain the status quo. And so guess what the alternative is the participation metaphor opens space to change storylines about teachers and teaching and what mathematics is. But this also has challenges, which we're gonna engage today. The participation metaphor takes us closer to changing not what teachers believe or think, but what they do with children. We need a new metaphor for teacher education. And I think, Deborah, you're gonna take us.
I think one thing to point out is there's a kind of tension in those last 2 points, which is, we said deliberately formal teacher education is dominated by the acquisition metaphor. Courses and professional development are like giving people ideas and giving people handouts and giving people, checklists and giving people readings. But actually, most teachers will tell you, we all will say, we learned most from just what we did in our own classroom. So somehow participation is a big source of learning, but we haven't really harnessed it well to think about, there's reality, you have to learn things about and in practice, but we're often leaving that to chance. So there's a kind of interesting tension that we're gonna get into here. So we've also said teachers have the power to author new storylines. We've said that over and over. So the question is, how do we set people up to do that? And then to realize that normative practice itself is the product of dominant storylines, ideas about children, ideas about mathematics, and so on. So we're really about trying to think about change. So we wanted to take a moment before we get into the activities that we'll do together to try to push inside of these metaphors and what it would look like to change the storylines of teacher learning and teacher education, to name what we're going to call 4 thorny challenges as we enter into the work of professional education. They'll probably be familiar to you, and we'll go through them kind of quickly, but the problem with them is that they're huge for us as people who support teachers, whether we work in institutions of higher ed or we work in school districts or ISDs. These things are going on all the time that make our work hard and can make it very hard to make change happen and to help teachers make change. So what's the first one? The first is that there are storylines about teaching also that permeate the whole environment in which teachers are working. These things have, ideas about learning and ideas about teaching. And we listed a few, and we invite you to take a minute to think what you might put in the other bubbles. But for example, the storyline that good teaching is about having good control, having a classroom in which classroom control is clear and that there's good classroom management. Think about those words and those metaphors of control, of managing. Those dominate, without us really stopping to realize them, and they're part of the storyline. Coverage, again, this is all, you can see it fitting with the acquisition metaphor too. We're covering content, right? We're controlling content. We're telling and we're showing things. So these are operating invisibly and are part of the storyline that can make how our conceptions of teachers and teacher learning permeate. So just give you a minute to turn to somebody nearby, just give you 30 seconds. What might you put in 2 more of those bubbles that you think are part of the dominant storylines about teaching itself? So Macy, you have a couple more to add? Macy, yes.
I have one to add. Measuring student achievement or measuring students. Did anyone come up with that one? Yeah.
Even the language of effective teaching, which effect means cause, is also a dominant kind of part of the storyline. Somehow we're causing learning. We know we're not causing learning, but that doesn't release the responsibility of really supporting learning. But those metaphors and those images are part of the storyline. So the second challenge is that teachers, this is well known, we all probably have experienced this, that firsthand experiences that we and all other teachers have had as we went through school ourselves are really powerful influences on people's practice. They often mean that things that we experienced that we thought were good teaching or we thought that teachers should do are both idiosyncratic and really powerful and don't get changed very much by professional education. And sometimes that has been called, some of you will be familiar with this phrase, the apprenticeship of observation, that teaching is unique in that it's the only occupation or profession that people have spent thousands of hours observing before they ever enter it. If you're a pharmacist, you haven't been watching pharmacists all your life, or any other occupation, but people have spent so much time in classrooms that unwittingly we've developed lots of ideas about good teaching and what we want to do. It seems like a matter of personal preference, but at the same time, kids haven't been what some people call behind the teacher's desk. That's a metaphor also. But it's not like being a kid helps you understand the thinking behind teaching or the challenges. You just see things. And that's a very powerful influence. And pretty well known that teacher education doesn't really interrupt that very much. In fact, it sometimes encourages finding your own style, finding the way things work for you seems to reinforce, like, whatever you think is actually fine. The third thorny challenge is that, and this is a hard one, it relates directly to the work we're doing together here, is that teaching is a practice. It's not a knowledge, it's a practice. And so it's something that teachers do with kids in real context that's nuanced and depends on the context, depends on the learners. And yet, at the same time, teacher education and professional development are dominated by knowledge. And often this notion of knowledge, because of course there are things to know, that's not our point, but these notions of knowledge are so often shaped by what somebody or other thinks teachers ought to know, what they should know. I mean, think, one area of work that I've done a lot of work is what should teachers know about mathematics to teach? And most of that discourse is about people making lists of things that they would like teachers to know. And very rarely is it at all about what comes up mathematically when you're teaching. Like, what is the mathematical stuff you have to think about and reason about when you're doing the work of teaching? That's not where those lists come from. They come from, it would be good if teachers knew 4 more years of math beyond where they teach. That's just an arbitrary sort of, let's name the knowledge. And you could say that about lots of other areas of knowledge that teachers are supposed to learn. So it's not that teaching doesn't involve knowing, thinking, reasoning, and so on, but it's more that it's dominated by domains of knowledge and at the same time isn't really centered on what it means to learn a practice. So learning a practice is different than acquiring knowledge. So this fits very well with the work we're trying to do together here. And it's hard to break out of that. It's a challenge. It's easier to be giving knowledge than to be thinking, what does it look like to learn practice? And you can think of other practices, and that might help you think, like, how do you learn to cook or to swim? Those things don't come about because you read about them, at least not solely. And finally, the last one is that change efforts themselves are fueled, and I'm sure we all experience this to a large extent, by sort of commodified, branded programs and approaches, one after another in a school district. So where we were working last week, there are so many layers of programs that have been brought into this particular school district over time. None of them really gets discarded. Some of them are actually in conflict with one another, but you can literally see them in the various books that are around and the language that's around, and it's just one layering after another, which over time, just these incompatible things are living in the world of teaching in classrooms and in school districts, and they're really hardly ever being challenged or discarded. So those are 4 challenges that permeate our work as people trying to support teachers to learn. So one is about the teachings of practice, one is about firsthand experience and its power, one is about this layering of multiple kinds of change, and thinking and contending with those is an important part of the work. So that takes us to what we want to work on together today, which is to think, how does professional learning, how can we design it? Because it's essential if we want to change storylines, but given those challenges, if we don't take account of those and think how we think about learning and how we design for it, the likelihood is that 10 years from now, we'll be at a session maybe here, maybe at the Wolf Lodge, maybe somewhere else, and we'll probably be having the same conversation. And we don't want to be having the same conversation. So contending with these challenges means thinking about how we can design so those harms that we know that are happening for students don't keep happening, and that we're helping change to happen.
And if I could just plug our session for tomorrow, if you don't believe us that things haven't changed, or maybe they have, come to the political history of math education and work with us to actually trace that full history from the early 1900s to where we are now, and to think together about what the political conditions are for math education. All right. So what we're going to do next is we're going to move out of us telling and transmitting to you doing and participating. Before we do that, though, I want to kick off with 2 scenarios of professional learning that are focused on Essential 6. Essential 6 is establishing a number sense routine. And what I want you to think about as I read these scenarios to you is, how do the metaphors for learning shape each scenario? What storyline about teachers, teaching, and educator learning are evident? Okay, you ready? So in scenario 1, a coach from Acqui ISD works with a building principal to schedule a session with the kindergarten and first grade teachers to work on Essential 6. The coach delivers a 2-hour session showing a deck of slides and handouts to introduce the teachers to this essential practice. The slides explain the activity and how to use it. The principal encourages them to include this routine in their daily work with their students. Got it? Does that seem familiar? Okay, let's look at scenario 2. A coach for Party ISD works with a building principal to schedule a session with the kindergarten and first grade teachers to work on Essential 6. To introduce them to this essential practice, the coach engages the teachers in a discussion of what the purposes of this routine could be and how it fits with other things they do with their students. The coach then divides the teachers into teams and provides them with a set of number sense routine activities to try in their classrooms across the next month, and schedules a few times for them to come together to discuss their experiences enacting a number sense routine. So the question, we want to do a little bit of mic pass around before we open this up, are what are the risks and affordances in each scenario? Got it? Let's take 2 minutes to think, and then let's get 5 report outs. Okay? Ready? Get to it. What are the risks and affordances of each of those scenarios?
Do you need them back up again, or are you okay?
Okay. So Let's expand the time. Let's take 5 minutes. We'll do a couple of minutes here and then a couple of minutes on the next scenario.
You want 3 or 5? Okay. Okay, we're going to take five comments on the risks and affordances. Who'd like to start us off? Somebody willing to start us off with naming what you see as risks and affordances of each scenario? What?
So at our table, we discussed that one of the affordance, particularly for scenario 2, is that it lends itself to people having different experiences, which is actually the flip side of what we thought the affordance for scenario 1 is. That, with scenario 1, each individual would get the same information at the same time, right? So there would add some consistency to the approach. However, the flip side of that is for scenario 2, it might expand people's ideas and give them different experiences to then come back to the table and describe each person's experience with the lessons and the activities. So we felt like there was kind of an affordance with both, but knowing how scenario 2 for us would generate more ideas to then bring to the table for implementation would add to the efficacy of the professional development.
Thank you. Someone else?
Hi. We only got to the first one, but we thought that what was the first question? See, I wasn't prepared to talk. They said I'm the tribute. I missed the nose. We said that in the first one, we felt like knowledge doesn't necessarily transmit to practice, so they were given knowledge, but not without a necessary expectation or follow-up for practice that people could do. And there really wasn't an opportunity provided for understanding, so we're not sure what people knew. And then we thought some affordances for that, well, it's time efficient, because you had 2 hours to make an awareness of the essential, so it brought about awareness.
Great.
We talked about in the first one, it was more of a sit and get, and there wasn't the follow-up afterwards. And with the principal telling you have to go in and do this, you get some pushback potentially. Where in the second, it was more the teachers had an opportunity, hands-on, to see what the students were going to be doing to help the students as they get stuck or ask those kinds of questions because they experienced it. And then there was follow-up after as well.
Anyone else?
It was kind of like on the first one, if you walked into McDonald's and they only had one thing on the menu and you liked it, then that worked for you and you walked away happy with your Big Mac, but you had probably a number of other people who walked into McDonald's and said, I'm never coming here again. Whereas in the second one, it felt like you were offered a menu of things. Like, here, I can choose this. And then also, you got to get together with your friends later and say, well, I really like the Big Mac. Well, I like the filet of fish, and I'm glad that they offered that. It kind of, the second method felt like maybe you would hit more people. Yeah.
One thing I just want to highlight is that I think the second scenario really presents this riskiness, right, of uncomfortability, where when each of us is experiencing something not at the same time, not in the same way, now we're leaving maybe with a little bit of a different interpretation or understanding than maybe a peer or a colleague, that feels uncomfortable. I mean, none of us like walking into our classroom being like, I think I know how this is going to go today. we want to know. We want to be sure. That is who we are as professionals. And so certainly I think scenario 2 puts us in a position where we have to be vulnerable to learning and growing, but not just in the setting, in front of our kids. And sometimes that's really, really uncomfortable. And that's something that we have to own.
It sounds like that's another one of those storylines about teaching that one should feel like one knows.
Okay. So we're going to move now, thinking about risks and affordances. So we're exercising that muscle. And now we're going to do some design work. We're going to design now educator learning. And we're going to use the workbooks that you've been starting, just as that's a place where you've been brainstorming and thinking and things are messy, and we want to keep building there. So I want at your tables, in your teams, however you feel most comfortable. That might mean working individually, it might mean talking across the table or working in pairs, but I'd like for you to choose an essential practice. Maybe it's an essential practice that's already being rolled out that you want to keep under the microscope and investigating. But what I want you to do next, after you choose that as a table, is imagine. And I want you to dream and dream big. I want you to dream about a professional. Are these the things you dream about when the best professional learning system that you could possibly imagine? But we have time to do that today and together. So I want you to be thinking both about the system and the experience in your particular context that's focused on learning as participation. We've raised some really interesting risks of the participation metaphor, and then I want you to think as you dream, how do you mediate some of those risks? Okay? Do you get the big idea? Questions? Okay, let's drill down a little bit more into what the activity will look like. So as you dream, we want you to dream in a way that allows you to anchor to your existing system. So you want to describe an implementation plan by exploring what roles, events, tools, and routines in your existing system and how those map onto your dream system. Does that make sense? It might mean in your big dream, you might need more math coaches, or you might need something else. But dream big, do it, imagine it, okay? And then let me tell you what we're gonna do after you connect to that, is that you're gonna represent your dream system and your dream experiences either as a narrative or some sort of figure that other people can look at and understand. And we're gonna share these with each other, because part of a participation frame means that we're going to engage with each other, we're going to recognize each other, and we're going to talk about our dream systems together.
Can I just add one thing? So when we say we're encouraging you to think about the participation as the metaphor of learning as participation, there are a couple of reasons. One is because we've said acquisition dominates in professional development. We give people new ideas, we give them new knowledge. It's all very packagey. We're encouraging you to think about the challenge that I talked about a few minutes ago, which is teaching as a practice. And teachers already have routines and practices. So think how you can design to engage people in participation in a way that will actually be something they're learning to do as well as understand. That's the challenge. And it's hard because that's not always the normative way we practice in professional training, professional education. So try to push yourself into that space. Doesn't mean there might not be something acquisitional in your design, but try to think about how you're really speaking to participating and helping people to think about their practice and supporting them.
In the activity, you're going to have about 20 minutes to do this work, and then we're going to stop you about after 20 minutes have passed. And if you're working in smaller groups, you're going to nominate one idea. And that idea is going to be the one that's posted in the Jamboard that we're all going to kind of look at together in a virtual gallery walk. And it's going to give you an opportunity to get feedback from other people and hear how amazing your dreams are. Or to give you some questions to think about the professional learning system that you're trying to build.
We might make the Jamboard available a little bit earlier if you're kind of ready to start representing.
Yeah, if you're ready to represent.
So we'll walk around and see how things are going. And
Questions?
Hail us down if you want any to talk about any of this. Okay.
It's really hard to see. Are there questions? Can you give me like a thumbs up or someone smile? Everyone smile really big at me. That'll make, oh, I love it. Yeah, there we go.
We'll walk around.
We'll walk around and we'll start the timer. We're just really excited to see what folks are thinking about. Two quick announcements. Announcement one is that some of you have discovered the Jamboard links are not working well or at all. We're going to fix that. But the other announcement is you have about 10 more minutes. So what we'd like for you to do is nominate that idea that's surfacing at your tables and figure out how you want to represent it so that everyone can see. I've heard a lot of really cool ideas that I think you'll be excited to hear and share with other people. So nominate that idea. You'll have 10 minutes once we get the links going for you to represent it on the Jamboard, okay? So if you haven't done so already, choose one, build it out, make sure you're attending to events, tools, routines, and roles.
please pause. So we're pulling a quick audible. As you all are experiencing, the Jamboard is working for very few, but a couple of privileged ones. So what we're going to do is many of you have your thinking and your drawing and your work on a piece of paper, and that's fantastic. We do hope for what's coming next that we have access to see some of the work. It's not finished, we know, but the work that you're thinking about for this dream system. So the way we're going to get access to it is for one person at the table to take out the app on your phone and just take a picture of the work you all are doing and then post it to the discussion wall. That way, just like earlier, you commented on a post that I made on the discussion wall. This time, you're gonna hit create new discussion, and then you can just hit the camera button on your phone and snap a photo. That'll give us access to the visual that you're creating for your dream system, and then Dr. Ball and Dr. Golson will be able to facilitate conversation where we share some of the components of the system. If you have questions, Trish, Sonia, and I will be running around and supporting you as you post to the discussion wall.
Okay, we're going to move into the next section of this. We're going to move next into the session of sharing. If you look in the discussion board, you should be able to scroll through now and see different groups' ideas. You can stretch it out if you look at it on your phone. And then we're going to have a few groups, just as few, are going to share out their idea while we project it. And we have some from our colleagues who are in the Upper Peninsula who have been participating remotely who have also shared. So that's really great to see the whole community that's working right now. So start looking through the discussion posts and look at some of the ideas that different people have. They're really interesting. And in a few minutes, we'll come together and hear from a few groups.
What you're learning about in professional development has to be directly tied to what you're doing in the classroom. So whether if you are learning about something in a professional development where you're out of the classroom, then it has to be directly tied to what you're doing. Yeah. And then you have to come back together, and you were talking about feedback. So right. there's different ways of getting feedback. There's having a coach come into the classroom. There's meeting with having other teachers, because you both mentioned being able to visit other classrooms. Yes. So almost like a lesson study model where you plan a lesson together, and then you look at the lesson and you provide each other feedback, and you replay or you make revisions and you try again. So right. It's that constant learning cycle. Yes. To where it's not just some expert telling you what to do, giving you a lesson. Right. So the only way I'm going to become better is if I have opportunities to practice and do what you are saying is going to be a better math practice. So I think I need to keep doing it. So we've kind of gone around and around a little, and I think we're saying a lot of the same things.
Are they going to come up here, or they're just going to stay there? Okay. They're going We're going to move into a few minutes of hearing from some of the groups who are going to say a little bit more about what they were trying to think about. And I think we're starting with a group way the back where Macy is. Look at Macy. So Dana is going to present for the table where she's sitting. Macy, do you want to say anything or just hand it over?
Okay. Hi, I'm Dana Gozen. I posted for our team back here for Oakland. And as part of the constellation of offerings that we're thinking about, we want a way to engage teachers with some math content specifically around fractions. And we thought about what our launch might look like for that. So we were thinking we wanted to launch the series with teachers engaging in a playful fractions task. In terms of having tools out there, we thought about some tools that are not often in our classrooms, like wheeze and air rods, and other fraction representation that could be tools for the teachers to be playing with. We would ask them to get into small groups of like 2 to 3 teachers and work on that task, have the opportunity to try out different representations and tools as they're working. And we thought that that would allow us to model how play is actually a really important thing for adult learners as well as for kids. And so over the course of several, like a 3-day series, we thought this would not just take on aspects of play and tinkering, but also think about equitable participation, and then have a series of questions that kind of became a routine to reflect on their learning that allows them to eventually get into what is it I already knew about fractions that helped me engage, and what was I able to learn through play. Having kids do, like we kept going and going, sorry. And then eventually have it where teachers would be able to watch kids play with the same task and have an opportunity to jot down what they felt like they were able to learn about kids learning and see, and how that might open up their minds about where they would go next to continue to support learning for kids.
Thank you. Can I also narrate, when I came over, you also said, we're dreaming, you didn't say this, but I said, what was your dream? And you said a 3-day institute where children are invited to the institute where teachers are, and teachers are watching children play. I think that's a beautiful dream. You made your dream sound very technical, but I think it's a beautiful dream because there are the parts of acquisition and the instructional practice that are built into what you're doing, but the dream itself was this really, what I saw was this really beautiful space with educators and children together. So, thank you.
So we have another group up here that we'll share. Oh yeah, right. Sorry about that. Okay, we have another group right here.
Okay. Hi, I'm Amber, and we focused on essential number 8, and it's not up there anymore, but it was a second ago. So we were focused on family engagement, and our dream, we wanted sort of the silver bullet to get families engaged in mathematical thinking at home, but also in changing, my colleague Carrie over here said, I really wish I could change the messaging that happens at home about mathematics. That idea of, oh, I'm not a math person, that so often starts at home, and wishing that we could change that. But how can we change the messaging of parents through professional learning with teachers? How do we do that? And so we came up with this idea that we would use vlogs, or we would introduce teaching staff to this idea of vlogging and sort of harnessing social media. I don't know about you all, but I've learned over the last few years that parents won't respond to my emails, they won't respond to my voicemails, but they will respond to a text message and they will check Instagram. So sort of harnessing that thing that can sometimes be a little bit of a pain in the butt for teachers, and instead use it as a way to communicate with parents in a way that they're already using. So we had this idea that we would begin by letting our teachers know that this was a way to support families. This wasn't just a way to push out an agenda to families. It's a way to support them and involve them. We started off by giving them a poll, how would you rate your current sort of relationship with technology, but also how would you rate your parents' collaboration within your classroom? And how would you say that your family's communication around math, thinking, and learning, how would you say that's affecting your children right now? How is that affecting your students at present? And what do you think can be done to improve? And then from there, we went ahead and we decided that, there's so many people today who just avoid social media, period. And I don't blame any of you, by the way, if that's any of you in the room. Don't blame you at all. But that we felt that it was important to sort of expose all of the teachers to all of the different platforms, because there might be some that some teachers are not familiar with, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or what have you. So give them the opportunity to maybe dive in and learn a little bit about each of the platforms, and then to separate them into groups, but specifically have them choose a platform that maybe they've never used before, and then put those like choices in groups together so that people who are equally sort of unfamiliar can sort of dive into the different platforms and learn about their capabilities and how they can be harnessed, and kind of level the playing field, rather than having some people who are very familiar with Instagram partnered with people who are totally, fresh and new. And then from there, having them create a sample video vlog that maybe is only a minute or two long. It might take them 10, 15 minutes to put together, but something that they can practice creating, right? We talk about participation, and creating is a way that we can do that, right? So having our teachers practice creating something and sort of feeling that vulnerability with the technology, with the platform, and then sharing those vlogs amongst the different groups. So that way, if I was in the Twitter group, I'm sorry, it's not called Twitter anymore. It's called X. Whatever, it's Twitter. And I can see how another group maybe used that one, whereas my group used Instagram, whereas another group maybe used Facebook, and really getting exposure to the different ways that this can be done while still being able to participate. And then our biggest thing that we felt made our approach a little bit different was accountability. We have often talked about how in professional learning, there's not a follow-up that says, hey, we gave you this training, this learning, we're hoping that you will use it. Oh, and by the way, we want to know how it went. So in our professional learning dream scenario, we had said that we wanted to challenge all of our teachers in our learning to try this once in a 4-week span, twice in a 4-week span, 4 times in a 4-week span, and that we would be back in 4 weeks. And we want to know, how did it go? What was difficult for you? What did you find was really successful? What worked? What didn't? And so we felt like giving them a choice of platform, having that accountability that is, I'm going to have high expectations for you, my staff, as much as we expect you to have high expectations for your kids, right? And modeling that, as well as we agreed that we would provide materials to them. So these vlogs would not only be ways to communicate with families, they could be a way to pose critical math thinking tasks that families can do with their kids at home, ways to challenge these math messages of negativity and bring math in the media, and bring that to the forefront of the conversations with families and kids. That providing those resources to our teachers was a really, really important thing. So in our dream, we would accomplish all of those things. It's a lot, but it's a dream.
Woo, woo.
That's really hard to follow. We dreamed of how we can create space for this work to happen in our area, and time, cognitive space for our teachers, space for them to develop their math identities and dream of something different, and specifically how to find those discretionary spaces within their curriculums and their materials and their lessons to incorporate more play.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't mean to editorialize everything, but I was really compelled by the idea that dreaming of just space and time to do work is a very worthy dream. And it also seems like a very ambitious dream. So I just really appreciated that. Thank you. One more, 2 more. You don't want to share your dreams? Ah, we have one over here.
I shouldn't have done this. I'm going to apologize to my boss because I'm probably going to cry. Okay. My dream is super simple. So I don't have a laundry list here, but we're just starting math in our county. Like, this is my second year into consult, whatever. I don't even know what my title is. So there you go. So I have a large thing to dream because there's really nothing there, but there is something there. But my big dream, when you were trying to say, Heidi, I need to stop talking, just focus, is joy. So bringing joy back to just teaching just feels heavy, kind of. And for those of you that were with Rusty in April, the whole values drive your behavior. I don't know if any of you were in that session, but that session spoke to my heart. Last year at this conference, I cried because it talked about values, and I just was losing my dad, and values are what bring me joy, right? They drive me. And so I just have a little picture of joy at the top, and me super teeny little, because I just want joy in the 5 districts that we serve. And I want, when I had to fill in because I am a rule follower, the routine, the tools, the roles, and the events. So my picture just has a bunch of happy people. See, that's why it seems so ridiculously elementary. But my routines are just, I want to build a culture of joy. And I tried to explain this of having joy at the adult level. Like what I was trying to explain to you is we want all of this with our little people, but we don't do it as adults. And so, again, sorry, I'm obsessed with this group of people because you model to us what you want us to take back and model back at home. And when I was 30 years ago in college, I was like, why are you teaching me to do what you're not doing yourself? And it was super annoying. But the tools is just relationship building and culture. What are the roles? I want to create a team. I don't have one. But the role, I want everyone to be a learner. Why am I crying? I'm super sorry. I just want the adults to be learners, and I want the kids to be learners. I want the administration to be learners. I want the parents to be learners. And just really focusing, too, on, like, professional learning and not professional development. Just try it, come back, let's talk about it. So I'm trying to model vulnerability. I think I'm doing a pretty good job because I need some Kleenexes, but anyways, joy, that's...
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Deborah to wrap this, but I think a common practice in educational research, and in particular critical education research, is talking about this notion of freedom dreaming. And a really important part of dreaming is saying it out loud and taking ownership of your dreams. That's how they manifest. And I really appreciate those of you that shared out. And I'm hoping that the discussion board becomes a place where we can start recognizing other people's dreams. And Deborah's going to take us through a few things, but just thank you for those of you that shared some vulnerability, some really ambitious dreams. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I echo all of that. And I think just to wrap up, we wanted to offer a couple of ideas to help you keep moving forward with your dreams. So we encourage you to think about the challenges that we named and the ones we talked about yesterday as well, about the power of storylines and all of the things we've been thinking about, the dominance of the acquisition metaphor, and seeing the importance of pushing ourselves as people who help teachers to learn, to think of how to break out of those things that really have a hold on our normative practice in order to support teachers to make those kinds of changes. So a couple of things to carry forward are continue to think hard and to interrogate yourself as you dream about whether you're pushing away from the tendency to want to give, deliver, offer. Not that there's never any place for that, as you well could see as you dreamed, but how can you move more toward participation, which means thinking about what is it that teachers are doing and how can you design to support them to learn to do those things. And then try to develop together designs for professional development and pedagogies, if you will, ways of working and teaching and about children and about math that support teachers to learn to engage in and actually change their practice. I don't know about you, but over time I accumulated so many binders and now folders on my computer of things that I couldn't quite enact. So in many cases, trying to figure out how to dig in, like you were doing about that, your particular idea and all the ideas we heard, how can you push to think about how we're actually supporting people, to think about what they do, to notice the challenges, and to begin moving into their practice. It's the key to being able to break out of the challenges. And we really encourage you to use one another's ideas to move forward. And as Macy said, tomorrow in a breakout session, we're going to look back and where we are now to think about what have been the patterns around efforts to make change, and what can we learn from those that will enable us to have this be a different time than the 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago when we talked about things like this and nothing really very much changed. So we'll challenge ourselves to think how have what we've been talking about help us to confront the realities of, to some extent, things staying the same despite the fact they look different, so that this decade that lies ahead of us will actually make change for children. So thank you for all of your engagement with us, and we look forward to hearing your comments about the session. Have a great afternoon. Are we having a break now? Yeah, okay. Thank you.